A janitor laughed at a homeless man. Seconds later, Keanu Reeves stepped out of the elevator, and everything changed. This is the story of that moment and the ripples it left behind. Have you ever judged someone just by the way they looked, only to be proven completely wrong? In a world that increasingly values surface over substance, how often do we miss the rich tapestry of human experience hidden beneath a worn exterior? Today's story is one that will shake your assumptions to their core, stir the embers of empathy within your soul, and remind you that true dignity isn't about the clothes we wear or the possessions we own, it's about the indelible mark we leave on the hearts of others. Welcome to Motivation for Success, where we share powerful, true-to-life stories that reveal the transformative strength of kindness, and the surprising ways justice emerges from the shadows when we least expect it. It was a cold Tuesday morning in downtown Los Angeles. The kind of rare, rain-soaked day that transforms the city of angels into something almost unrecognizable. Raindrops tapped against the windows of the Regal Oak Hotel, a luxurious five-star establishment where polished marble floors gleamed and an unspoken rule hung in the air: appearances mattered here. They mattered a great deal. At the center of the lobby, the janitor mopped the floor with the half-interest of someone who had seen it all before. His name was Daryl Matthews. Middle-aged, wiry, with crow's feet around eyes that had grown increasingly cynical over the years. He wasn't the meanest guy in Los Angeles, not by a long shot, but he had developed a particular talent for talking down to people who didn't fit the Regal Oak's unwritten dress code. Especially anyone who looked like they couldn't afford a cup of coffee, let alone a night's stay. Another day in paradise, Daryl muttered to himself, watching as businessmen in tailored suits strode across his freshly mopped floor, leaving faint impressions of Italian leather in their wake. He didn't mind them. They belonged here. They fit the picture. That's when the automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, letting in a gust of cold, damp air that seemed to carry with it something the Regal Oak rarely encountered: reality. A man stepped inside, drenched from the rain. Water dripped from his beard and pooled at his feet, creating small islands on the immaculate marble. His coat, once probably a decent garment, was now torn at the sleeves, patches of different colored fabric telling stories of makeshift repairs. His shoes, caked in mud, left traces of the outside world with every hesitant step he took. A small, rolled-up sleeping bag was strapped to his back with fraying bungee cords, and his hands, red and chapped, trembled visibly as he tried to warm them. Immediately, heads turned. The front desk clerk, a young woman named Amanda who prided herself on her professional composure, froze mid-sentence while checking in a family of tourists. A bellboy tightened his grip on the luggage cart, his knuckles whitening. Two women sitting in the plush armchairs of the waiting area exchanged glances, their conversation about charity galas suddenly forgotten. Daryl, the janitor, narrowed his eyes and muttered under his breath, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Here we go again. Another stray looking for a handout. As if we're running a shelter instead of the finest hotel in downtown." The man didn't approach anyone. He didn't beg. He didn't cause a scene. He just stood by the radiator in the corner, rubbing his hands together, as if hoping to warm up just for a moment before facing the cold world outside again. His eyes, a deep, weathered blue, scanned the room not with entitlement, but with the wariness of someone who has grown accustomed to rejection. But the lobby wasn't having it. Not today. Not ever. Amanda at the front desk reached for the phone, her manicured finger pressing the button for security. Within moments, one of the guards, a broad-shouldered man named Keith with a military haircut and a face that rarely smiled, made his way toward the unwanted visitor, his footsteps heavy and deliberate on the marble floor. Think for a moment, have you ever been in a public place where someone was treated as if they didn't belong? What was your first instinct, to look away or to look closer? "Sir," Keith began, already speaking in that particular tone security guards reserve for those they deem unwelcome. Not shouting, but loud enough to establish dominance. Clear enough to send a message to everyone watching: this is how we handle problems here. This is private property. You can't stay here. You need to leave. The homeless man turned around, eyes wide, revealing a face that might once have been handsome before life had carved its disappointments into every line. "Please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just need 5 minutes to warm up. That's all. I'll leave right after. The shelter doesn't open until 6, and I..." But Keith didn't care about shelters or their opening hours or what happened to people in the rain. He had a job to do. Rules to enforce. "No loitering," he said, cutting the man off mid-sentence. "Out. Now." That's when Daryl, seeing an opportunity to assert his own small measure of authority, walked over, a grin spreading across his face like an oil slick. "Yeah, you heard him," he said, his voice dripping with a cruel kind of pleasure that sometimes fills the empty spaces in hearts that have forgotten their own vulnerability. "Move it along. This ain't no shelter. People pay good money to stay here, they don't pay to share space with." He gestured vaguely at the man's entire existence. The homeless man flinched, not at the volume, but at the shame. At the casual cruelty. At the fact that he was being spoken to like an animal, not a person whose heart beat with the same rhythm as everyone else's in that gleaming lobby. And then, the elevator dinged. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. All eyes turned toward the elevator doors as they slid open, momentarily forgetting the drama unfolding by the radiator. Out stepped a man in a black hoodie pulled low over his forehead, dark jeans worn at the knees, and scuffed sneakers that had seen better days. His hair, slightly wet from the rain, hung in dark strands around a face that seemed both familiar and unplaceable. He walked slowly, calmly, but there was something about him. Some quiet presence that made people stop and notice. An aura of gentle confidence that needed no announcement. It was Keanu Reeves. At first, no one recognized him. In the regal oak, where wealth announced itself with flash and ostentation, a man in a hoodie and worn jeans didn't immediately register as someone of importance. He was just another person passing through. But he noticed everything. The security guard's stance of authority. The homeless man's posture of shame. The janitor's expression of cruel amusement. The lobby's atmosphere of collective judgment. Keanu stopped in the middle of the floor. For a moment, he just stood there, taking in the scene with dark eyes that missed nothing. Then, without hesitation, he walked directly toward the homeless man and stood beside him. Not in front of him, as if to shield him. Not behind him, as if to push him forward. But beside him. As an equal. Keith, the security guard, frowned, confusion replacing the certainty in his expression. "Sir, we were just asking him to leave." Keanu held up a hand. Calm. Steady. Not aggressive, but immovable. "He's with me." 3 simple words. Spoken quietly, but with a clarity that echoed across the marble expanse of the lobby. Silence. No one said a word. Amanda at the front desk blinked rapidly, her mind processing the scene before her. Daryl's smile disappeared, replaced by the uncomfortable expression of someone suddenly aware they're on the wrong side of a situation. And the homeless man looked up, confusion etched across his weathered features. What would you have done in that moment? Type 1 if you would have stepped forward like Keanu. Type 2 if you're not sure you would have had the courage. Type 3 if this made you reflect on your own past judgments. Keanu nodded to him, a small gesture of reassurance, then turned back to the staff. "Is there a problem?" he asked gently. No accusation in his voice. Just a simple question that somehow contained within it the weight of judgment. No one dared to respond. The logic of celebrity had suddenly scrambled the hotel's hierarchy of worth. If this man, this bedraggled, rain-soaked stranger, was with Keanu Reeves, then where did he fit in their carefully constructed social order? "I'm staying here," Keanu continued, his voice soft but resolute. "This man is my guest." The homeless man opened his mouth, trying to speak, but no words came out. His lips trembled, and for a moment, all he could do was stare at Keanu, as if he were seeing something impossible. A mirage in the desert of his existence. Daryl, sensing the shift in power and desperate to realign himself with it, took a step forward, his face arranged in an approximation of contrition. "Look, man, we didn't know you knew him." He looked like. Like what? Keanu's voice was quiet. Not angry. Just, sharp enough to cut through the pretense. Sharp enough to expose the judgment that had been so casually dispensed. Daryl went silent, the question hanging in the air unanswered because any honest response would only indict him further. Keanu turned back to the man, his expression softening. "I remember you," he said softly, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "You used to be my art teacher. Mr. Hall. At Huntington Park High School. You stayed after hours to help me when no one else would. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." The man stared back in disbelief, the wheels of memory turning behind his eyes. His lips parted, and recognition slowly dawned on his face like the first light of day breaking through darkness. "You were that quiet kid," he said, his voice finding its strength. "The one who always stayed behind to draw, who was struggling with perspective but had such a natural feel for emotion in your sketches." Keanu smiled, and it was a smile that transformed his face, erasing the boundary between the global superstar and the young student he had once been. "That was me." And now, the entire lobby was speechless. The celebrity they had just watched on billboards and movie trailers, was now standing beside a homeless man and calling him his mentor. The man they had been ready to cast out into the rain was being revealed not as a nuisance, but as a teacher. Someone who had shaped lives. Someone who had mattered. How many times have we failed to see the full story of a person's life? Comment below with a time you discovered someone was much more than they first appeared. Keanu turned to the front desk, where Amanda stood frozen, her professionalism momentarily abandoned in the face of this unexpected development. "Give him the room next to mine," Keanu said, not as a request but as a statement of what would happen. "And make sure he gets dry clothes and hot food." The staff scrambled into action, suddenly eager to accommodate the man they had been about to eject. Keith, the security guard, stepped back, his face an unreadable mask. Daryl picked up his mop and retreated to a far corner of the lobby, suddenly finding an invisible spot that needed his urgent attention. As Mr. Hall was led toward the elevator, Keanu's hand resting lightly on his shoulder, the homeless man turned back once to look at the lobby. At the place that had, just moments ago, deemed him unworthy of basic human kindness. There was no triumph in his gaze. No vindication. Just a quiet disbelief, as if he were still processing the sudden turn his day had taken. Later that night, in the hotel restaurant with its soft lighting and hushed conversations, the two men sat by the fireplace, eating in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because some moments don't need words. Because sometimes, the simple act of sharing space, of breaking bread together, says more than language ever could. Mr. Hall ate slowly, savoring each bite of a meal that was probably the first proper one he'd had in weeks. His clothes, now clean, pressed hotel garments, hung slightly loose on his frame, telling the story of meals missed and hardships endured. Keanu watched him, not with pity, but with a respect that acknowledged the man behind the circumstances. The teacher who had once guided his hand was still there, beneath the layers of hardship that life had wrapped around him. Before leaving the table, Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope, cream-colored and heavy with the weight of what it contained. He handed it to Mr. Hall with both hands, a gesture of respect in its deliberateness. "I've been looking for you," Keanu said quietly. "For years. To thank you properly." Mr. Hall took the envelope with trembling fingers, his eyes questioning. "Open it later," Keanu said, standing up. "When you're alone. Tonight is just about two old friends reconnecting." But later, in the privacy of his hotel room, with its king-sized bed and view of the Los Angeles skyline, Mr. Hall did open the envelope. Inside was a check, the amount substantial enough to change a life, and a handwritten note that simply said, "For the lessons that shaped my life. Not just about art, but about seeing beauty in unexpected places. Thank you for showing me how to really look at the world." Mr. Hall wept. Not because of the money, though it would change his immediate circumstances. Not because of the hotel room, though it offered a respite he desperately needed. But because after all these years, after the cruelties of fate and the indifference of a world that had moved on without him, someone remembered. Someone still cared. And someone was willing to stand beside him when everyone else turned away. Not because of status. Not because of fame. But because kindness never forgets. Because the imprints we leave on others' lives endure long after our circumstances change. Because dignity isn't something that can be taken away by homelessness or poverty or misfortune, it's an inherent quality that deserves recognition regardless of external appearances. The next morning, as Mr. Hall prepared to check out, he found Keanu waiting for him in the lobby. The same lobby that had, just a day before, been the site of his humiliation. "I've made some arrangements," Keanu said, handing him a card with an address written on it. "A friend of mine runs a community arts program. They need teachers. People who can see potential in others, just like you saw it in me." Mr. Hall looked at the card, then back at Keanu, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm not. I haven't taught in years," he admitted, his voice carrying the weight of his doubt. Keanu smiled that same gentle smile. "Some things you don't forget. Like riding a bike. Or seeing the artist behind the art." As they walked out of the hotel together, something had shifted. Keith nodded respectfully, Amanda smiled with genuine warmth, and Daryl, the janitor whose laughter had cut so deeply just a day before, stood silently, eyes downcast. 2 weeks later, a memo went out to all Regal Oak staff. Mandatory sensitivity training was being implemented, and the first name on the attendance sheet was Daryl Matthews. But something had already changed in him. That night, after his shift ended, he'd walk to the corner where homeless individuals often gathered and handed out coffee and sandwiches he'd bought with his own money. No cameras recorded this. No one praised him for it. It was simply the quiet beginning of atonement. "I was wrong," he would later tell a new employee who made a disparaging comment about a shabbily dressed guest. You never know someone's story until you've heard it. For Mr. Hall, the transition wasn't immediate or easy. Years of living on the streets had left wounds that couldn't be healed with a single act of kindness, no matter how profound. The first week at his new apartment, secured with Keanu's help, he slept on the floor beside the bed, the comfort of a mattress too foreign after years of concrete and park benches. But slowly, steadily, he reclaimed pieces of himself. 3 months after that rainy day at the Regal Oak, he stood before his first class at the Community Arts Center, hands still trembling slightly, but eyes clear and voice steady as he demonstrated how to capture light and shadow. Art isn't about perfection, he told his students, a diverse group ranging from troubled teens to elderly retirees. It's about seeing what others miss. It's about finding dignity in the overlooked corners of existence. One student in particular, a 14-year-old boy named Miguel with anger issues and a talent for drawing that had gone unnoticed in the public school system, became Mr. Hall's special project. "She reminds me of my abuela," Miguel said one day, showing Mr. Hall a sketch of a homeless woman he passed on his way to the center. "Then you draw her," Mr. Hall replied softly. "Draw her for all the people no one ever saw." A year later, a small art gallery in East Los Angeles held an exhibition that caught the attention of the local art scene. "Second Chances, Portraits of Resilience," the banner read. Inside, the walls were lined with paintings and drawings, powerful, emotive works that captured human dignity in the faces of those society often overlooks. Miguel's triptych showing the same homeless woman in three different lights, as society saw her, as she saw herself, and as she truly was, had already received offers from collectors. The grandmother he never got to honor in life, he was honoring through his art. Mr. Hall moved through the crowded gallery, no longer in torn clothes but in a simple button-down shirt. No longer trembling from cold but steady-handed as he guided visitors through the exhibition. No longer invisible but seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. In the corner, watching quietly, stood a man in a black hoodie, a small smile on his face. Keanu had arrived without fanfare, slipping in through the side entrance to avoid drawing attention. "Your work is impressive," Keanu told Miguel when they were introduced, with the genuine respect of one artist to another. "Especially the way you handled light in the eyes." "Mr. Hall taught me that," Miguel said. "Eyes are windows that work both ways, they let us see in and let the person's soul shine out." Keanu smiled, glancing at his former teacher. "He taught me the same thing, a long time ago. I still use that lesson, even in my acting. The eyes never lie." What would you have done if you discovered your former teacher was homeless? Type 1, if you would have helped them immediately. Type 2, if you would have felt too awkward to approach them. Type 3, if this story makes you want to reconnect with a teacher who impacted your life. Before leaving the gallery that night, Keanu paused before a small painting near the exit, a simple scene of two people standing side by side in a hotel lobby, positioned in a way that conveyed perfect equality. He purchased it without hesitation. It wasn't about him or that day. It was about what it meant to truly stand beside another person, not in front, not behind, but alongside. Back at the Regal Oak Hotel, Daryl had become something of an unofficial ambassador for the hotel's new approach to hospitality, suggesting a partnership with a local shelter to provide job training for individuals trying to get back on their feet. "People look at you different when you're on the streets," Jose, a trainee, had told him during a coffee break. "Like you're not even the same species anymore." Daryl had nodded, the memory of his own cruelty toward Mr. Hall still a source of shame. "I used to be one of those people doing the looking," he admitted. "I was wrong." A single moment in a hotel lobby, a moment when one person chose to stand beside another, had expanded outward to touch hundreds of lives. Mr. Hall's students. The people they, in turn, chose to see. Daryl's evolution from casual cruelty to intentional kindness. Because unlike the ripples of cruelty, which diminish with distance, the ripples of compassion often grow stronger as they touch more lives. Because no one is beneath dignity. And the way we treat those with the least, says the most about us. Stay kind. Stay awake. And stay human. Remember that the person you pass without seeing today might be the one who shaped your life yesterday. The hands now reaching out might have once guided yours. The eyes now downcast might have once seen greatness in you before you saw it in yourself. In a world that increasingly values what people own over who they are, choose to be the one who remembers. The one who recognizes. The one who stands beside. Not because it's easy. Not because it's expected, but because kindness is the only true legacy we leave behind. Who is the Mr. Hall in your life, the person who believed in you when no one else did? Tag them in the comments, or share this video with someone who once stood beside you when everyone else walked away. Drop a comment below. Type 1 if you've witnessed such treatment. Type 2 if you've been through it yourself. Type 3 if you've been the one to intervene when others wouldn't. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who once helped you when no one else would, or someone who has been misunderstood or judged unfairly. Because you might just be the Keanu Reeves in their life story, the one person brave enough to stand beside them when everyone else turns away. Don't forget to subscribe to Motivation for Success, where we bring you stories that speak to the heart, challenge the mind, and remind you what truly matters in a world that often forgets. We'll see you in the next story.